Welcome to another edition of Throwing Out Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Binding. I'm the chair of the board of Movement Omaha for Race Equity. And part of our agenda is to deal with issues related to anti-racism, advocacy, transparency, and accountability. And one of the things that we like to do is bring guests on our show to talk about various issues in our community, people who have been in our community, but more than anything, focus on racial diversity and trying to deal with some of the racial divide in our society and so on. Today, we have a special guest in our studios today, Dr. Lerlean N, who's an educator and assistant principal in Atlanta Public Schools. Over the years, she has worked in many professional capacities, and she has a bachelor's degree from Morningside College, a master's degree from Bellevue University, and a PhD from Argosy University, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. Lerlean acquired a basketball scholarship at Morningside after playing basketball at North High School. She also worked at IBM, the Boys and Girls Town, and had other jobs related to selling life insurance in various states. Um, we've asked her to share some of her accomplishments as an African American raised in Omaha who traveled to other states during her career. First, Dr. Lerlean Johnson, can you share a little bit more about yourself to the participants?
Yes, good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I am excited to be here, and I thank everyone for tuning in. You could be anywhere else, as people typically say, but you chose to spend this evening with us. So I want to thank you. I don't take your time for granted. Just a little bit about me. I am a small town girl from Omaha, Nebraska in the Midwest. Got an opportunity to be raised with a very large family. I think we were poor by today's standards, but we didn't know it. We had love, we had each other, we had a mother and father to guide us. We had a lot of great opportunities that were provided. So we stand on the shoulders of many others. And the interesting thing is, I am currently working in the capacity of a servant, which all of my siblings, we spend our life humbly serving others. And that is what we like to do, and I'm so blessed to be able to do that. So, and as you mentioned in the bio, I'm currently working in the capacity as an assistant principal at a high school and middle school here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. In addition to that, I'm also a board member for a national youth child care organization, an advocacy agency. So that's very exciting. And then I also have an LLC to provide life insurance for different families in that. So very excited to be here this evening.
Good. Now, as someone who knows how to close a deal, what are some of those obstacles as an African American woman that you've had to address or deal with?
Well, growing up in Nebraska, I think prepared me in terms of just being involved in different settings where people are different than me. But as you know, and as people know, when you grow up in a setting, that's your normal. So what I learned from my parents, from my family, from different jobs and universities is that wherever you are, grow wherever you're planted. Make a difference from the inside, from the outside. And one of the things that I learned from watching my mother had a certain way that she's done things. I tend to use more of a diplomatic approach. I like to kind of get to know people to build relationships. In fact, just a quick story. There was an instance where my mother had a bad experience, and she was all 100% right in terms of her advocation. And I remember as a young adult, I talked to my mom. I said, "Mom, I know there's a time and a place for everything. Allow me to address this." I addressed it in a different manner. She says, "Okay, that works too." And I think the way that she did it was something that had to be done during her time. And one of the things that I use now is a lot of diplomacy and relationship building. And I've learned that through the different companies that I've worked for from home, as well as through my university training and just life experiences.
Dr. Johnson, I've had a deep-seated fear and fascinating with the South due to its complex racial violence history towards African Americans. I remember my mother telling me one time to avoid Mississippi because somebody in our family was lynched there. And again, she didn't say which generation when it happened, but it was one of those things that was passed down to. So I'm kind of fearful of the South in a sense. But then I've heard different stories. I've been to the South since then. However, many African Americans have returned back to southern cities and towns who migrated, their family migrated to the north, such as Colorado, Nebraska, elsewhere. What is it like contrast living in Nebraska versus Georgia?
Well, one of the things that brought me to Georgia was I used to work for IBM in Nebraska, and one of the things that I did is I traveled with them. One of IBM's main training centers was here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And quite frankly, when I first came here, I was culture shocked because I hadn't seen this many Black people, successful Black people. It was a good thing. And of course, I love the weather. You can't help but love the weather, the contrast from the Midwest and the snow. And so once I, left IBM and got into education, I got an opportunity to come here to the Atlanta, Georgia area. And I have to say and again, these are all my own personal experiences, whether I am in a predominantly Black, white, it literally, it doesn't matter. The biggest part of it from my perspective is you and what you bring and how you deal with situations. Now, certainly I dealt with racism. Yes, I've dealt with it here. I've dealt with reverse racism, sexism, probably every kind of ism that you can name. But one of the things that I have learned, you mentioned that you were fearful. One of the things my mom taught me is God does not give us the spirit of fear. And so I walk in that. And so I approach whatever the challenge may be in a very hopeful and positive mindset. And I'm almost 100% sure whatever the negative situation is, I can work through it, whether it's blatant racism, whether it's sexism, whatever the case may be. And so I've had great experiences here. I would recommend it, but I think that you need to bring your light with you, build relationships. And if there's a difficult or a tough situation, you find a way to collaborate with others and to work through it. And that's worked for me.
And as you mentioned the word collaborate, that's one of the biggest challenges we face is people of color, people who deal with oppression. And sometimes we don't collaborate and we don't use the group thought. And I remember one time my uncle said to me, if some of us got together and shared our collective knowledge and wisdom, we could be a lot farther away. So there's something about social capital, social relationships, and so on. I also know that you travel to Kenya, East Africa, and I know there are a number of African Americans here in Omaha that go to Ghana, and there's a sister city, I think, in Ghana with some of the so-called leaders and so on in this city. How did you manage that trip, and what was your experience traveling to the motherland? And I assume that was your first time, or was it?
Yes, that was my first time. Certainly I encourage anybody who has an opportunity to travel abroad to certainly take that opportunity. One of the things that I teach my students as an administrator, as well as when I was in the classroom, is to gravitate towards people who are not like you, right? Embrace their experiences, learn, try to find out what their perspective is. And I do it simply even in the school district and the school that I'm in today. As I said, when you go to the cafeteria, you can sit by your friends, that sit by someone who you don't know, get to know a different perspective. And in life, embrace. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. That's how you expand. And even when I was a student at Morningside College, I did that. And I would go home with different families that I was different from, or I would bring them from. And so one of the things I got the opportunity to go to Kenya in the school that I'm working at, one of my teachers, he and his wife sponsored a trip to Kenya and brought a group of coworkers and friends, kind of a missionary trip. So that was one of the ways that I got the opportunity to go there. I've gotten an opportunity to travel abroad in a lot of places. And like I say, it absolutely expands your horizon. You meet different people. It helps you to, you can kind of gauge your life. A lot of things will show you how blessed, how grateful that you should be. I am so grateful for a lot of things that I see across the country that I have not had to endure. And by the same opportunity, it gives me an opportunity to give back, because we got an opportunity to donate, to meet with the teachers, to go to the different schools, to share ideas, to receive ideas, as well as share ideas. And that's what helped me. And hopefully we help them to grow as people and educators.
By the way, how long does it take to fly there? And give me a ballpark. What does it cost for a
Okay,
ticket, international ticket?
yes, and I've done a lot of traveling since then. Let me see if I can remember. I think we went to Switzerland. I'm a guesstimate. Someone can double check it, from the Atlanta to Switzerland. That was approximately, I'm going to say 8 to 10 hours. And then we did like another maybe 10 to 12 hours into Kenya.
Wow, most people don't know that. But what's the cost? What are we talking ballpark? Right.
Well, it varies. I'm pretty sure we got the inside track because we had like I said, a gentleman who was from the Kenya area, and he set up trips and missions and that type of thing. So we got a still of a deal. And then, of course, I was one of the people on the committee, and the more people that you invited, then you could get a bit more of a discount. So I invited several brothers and sisters and friends. So I don't even know if I should say my price out loud, but it's not the price that you'll get today. But I got like 50% discount. I'm going to say a couple $1,000s. That's probably not what you're going to pay right now, though. But
You
that
know,
included everything. So
you know what's funny is you mentioned that. I was telling somebody to get from here to South Africa, Botswana, it's like a 22 hours actual flying time. And also there's a direct flight about 16 hours or more from Atlanta, Georgia, directly into Johannesburg. But you can see ticket prices going anywhere from like 1,300 to 2,000. If you get one of those special tickets through what do you call Ethiopia, you might even get it down as low as $900 or something. But you have to be careful because they're trying to throw that insurance at you. But again, there's places go direct from New York to places on the continent that are much cheaper. But again, you got to shop around. But again, people think it's like flying from New York to California. Nope, it's like triple that amount of flight when you're crossing that ocean, and you got to go obviously to directly to Africa or you go directly to a European country.
mhm.
Now, there is currently an eraser, I want to use the word eraser type of African American culture and history and post secondary institution that's going on in Nebraska university system. And I've talked to some of the professors and administrators who work there that they've taken all the stuff about multiculturalism, diversity. They even got rid of the diversity department at UNO and fired the so-called chief diversity officer they brought in about 2 years ago. How is a city that has a high percentage of African Americans, such as Atlanta, Georgia, in dealing that, considering the current administration in Washington, D.C., and particularly if they're talking about you need to, if you want some of the additional federal funds and that, you got to downplay this diversity and the history of African Americans. How are you guys dealing with that as an educational institution?
Well, as an educational institution, in some cases your hands are a little tied, but we like to face it head on. We are not going to erase the history. We're not going to erase us. I think it's something that you need to deal with head on. I think you need to stand strong. You need to advocate. And even in the face of, it seems like you're just putting your finger in this tsunami of water coming at you. You just have to be able to be hopeful and believe and take it one step at a time. And there is a lot of obstacles that we're facing right now, but we are just kind of ticking away with it one step at a time. And the thing you have to sometimes you have to find loopholes, but what we're not doing is we're not going to cow to the current situation, the current climate administration, and allow that to happen to our people, to our children. And by the same token, we feel the same way about whatever another race or nationality or minority is. People, we look at people as humans as a whole, and we want to stand and we want them to be a part of it. So that whole DEI situation, I find it very negative and offensive. And however you need to, I think you need to stand against it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Now, in your city, you have several historical black colleges and universities. In actual fact, I think at one point I actually went to one, which I was surprised. I've never been to one in my life. I just toured through it. We have programs about attending such place in our more. We interviewed someone who talks to young people about going to HBCs and so on. Again, I don't know a lot about them per se. What are your observations about the debate and discussion for African Americans versus going to a white university or college? How do you
Yes,
see that? As someone who went particularly to predominantly white universities versus someone who went to a historically black college or university.
yeah, and thank you for that question. I've had the opportunity to do both. I don't think it's in my bio, but one of the things that I did is I got my leadership in education degree from Clark at Atlanta University, which is one of the historically black colleges right here in the Atlanta area. And one of the things I had a very good experience in Iowa at Morningside University, at University of Nebraska at Omaha, as well as at Clark Atlanta University. And again, I hate to keep saying this. Well, I don't hate to keep saying it, but it's true. A lot of it is what you bring. Did I have some negative experiences at Morningside? Yes, they did not outweigh my positive experience. The same thing will be true at UNO, and the same thing is true at Clark Atlanta. So, I think it is what you make it, but I also want to say this. I certainly understand when you go to a university or you're in a setting where, people are like you, especially if you come at a very young age. If you come when you're right out of high school and you're very impressionable and maybe vulnerable, I think it's important to be in a positive setting that embraces you. I know a young man who went to school. He wanted to be a veterinarian. Brilliant young man, African American young man. He went to a school in Nebraska, and he just did not. He got ill treated. They felt like he felt like they were discouraging him. I don't think he even recognized it. They were discriminating against him. He ended up dropping out. And then when he talked to a gentleman in the Atlanta area, and had an opportunity to possibly get into that program, they embraced him in a whole nother way. He ended up changing careers, but I think that would have been an opportunity if he had been embraced at a young age and shown people who look like him, who are veterinarians, that role modeling is such an important part of it. I think he would have had a different outcome and path in terms of chasing his passion, which was to be a veterinarian. But again, I found great experiences, some negative in both. And again, it's what you make of it.
By the way, we had Rochelle Tucker who talked about historical Black colleges. She actually works years ago for the Urban League, but she partners with them and other people. And she takes a group of young Black students down to some of those historical Black colleges to help them enroll. And when we was interviewing her, she made a comment which I found somewhat amazing or perplexing somewhat. She said she encourages adolescents or young people to go their first years to historical Black colleges. He said for graduate degree, she would go to a white college. And so her point was the very point you just made, Dr. Johnson, that we need to be conscious of how we fit in. And I went to school in Lincoln where a couple of folks, they fell or flunked out after a semester or two because they didn't have the support system. And I tell people up front, I didn't do too well my first semester. I was on probation. And then finally I got to the hook that I had a lot of younger siblings follow me. So I had to do some serious studying and buckle down. But again, I know it's very important the first year when you're away from home to have the kind of support system emotionally as well as intellectually and financially to help you succeed. And college is not easy for a lot of our kids because they come through school systems that don't always prepare them adequately to deal with post-secondary education where no one, in university college, they don't tell you nobody's looking at your shoulder until you get the homework done. Either you do it or you don't. And the teacher's going to get his or her salary regardless. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. We're doing very well in terms of, but I want to switch up a little bit and ask you a question. One of the things that we face, and I think it happened way back in the busing case and elsewhere, people talk about the issue of role models. And they talk about the importance of those who in leadership has to have a certain kind of a background and so on. And many Africans look for positive role models, both folks who have been successful despite their humble beginnings. And one of the things I wrestle with the leadership in this city is that I get tired of seeing the same old personalities on advisory committees or friends of the system instead of people who are struggling or people who have issues. So my question to you is, what are you saying to you about in your circles about influence of role models and how do you see that? Because the reason I asked that question, Lerlean, we have to mute somebody here. The reason I asked that question is I've talked to older people and said there's a disconnect between older and young people. And again, you've been with younger people, and it's a long-winded question. What is that like for you in your circles dealing with young people, old people, and role models?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. I would say now as an administrator, and I'm probably within, quite frankly, a year to 2 years from retiring from education. So I'm at the end of my career. So very apropos because now, not just talking about the children, but talking about younger teachers and younger educators, particularly coming out of coming out of
Right.
COVID-19. So I have learned to adjust my management style, my coaching, my leadership, my modeling style. Otherwise, you're going to lose a whole generation of folks. And we need those folks. Generally speaking, I do a pretty good job of relating to young children, but I realize now I'm more of the grandmother. I'm not their mother. I'm not their auntie. One of my kids made me well aware of that not too long ago when he says, "Hey, and I thought I was going to get offended. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I am grandmotherly. See, I used to be auntie. I used to be mom. But in either case, my teachers are mom. And it is so important for me to embrace them, whatever they're bringing. And they're bringing a lot of things, right? To them, it's not as important to get to school on time every day. For me, that's like, oh my goodness, back in the day, that's a fireable offense. They have so many other great things that they bring. They're good with the technology. They're good with the children. I have some of them that have difficulty getting there on time. So I kind of adjust the schedules so that, okay, we're going to get you started at 9 and then you go a little bit longer because I found, especially coming out of COVID-19, if I just dismiss that group, then guess who's teaching those class and administrating and I mean, this younger group has a different mindset. So us old heads, as you or however you want to refer, we have to learn how to adjust because that's a whole generation of folks. And a dear friend of mine simply told me just recently when we were having a confidential conversation, and I was saying, "Oh my, hey, oy vey, you know what they do now?" He said, "It's time for you to move on. They'll be fine." And so you just got to try to embrace them. The role modeling factor, as you asked, is is imperative. For myself, I try to be a role model for my teachers, for my older teachers, my younger teachers. I ask my teachers to be a role model for the youth. And it is so important that people see themselves in the people who are coaching them, teaching them, managing them, because they want to be able to move to that next level. And the way that you do that is through relationship building. That relationship building, even if they get themselves in a pickle or a conundrum and you have to kind of help them work through it, even if you have to let them go because they're no longer working with the company for something they did. You want to have a courageous conversation in love and relationship building, and they will respect you so that you can continue to role model and coach them. I think it is so important to use that in terms of the role modeling and the coaching, the relationship building, the hopefulness, the positivity, and the love.
As you mentioned that we had recently an African American history conference in North Omaha, and one of the fascinating breakout sessions was the intergenerational conversation between older people and younger people. We didn't get a lot of younger people involved, but one of the things I wish we had more is that whole continuity of having organizations sponsor elders in our community, young people, because older people, as that African proverb goes, they're like a library. And I don't think our institutions do a good job of that. I've even talked to people who have PhDs in education, told me they've never been invited to the public schools to talk. Again, they could teach at the university level. I use myself as an example, growing up in a large family and teach at the university, Metro, Nebraska Methodist College, UNO. But in my lifetime, only twice have I been invited. And one of those was an accident. They didn't know who I was. I've been disinvited too, but you got to bring people who come through the channel of the struggle to let them know how they did it. And I do think poverty is a major factor in our community. And I really wish we do a much better job of bringing older people who've gone through a lot of turmoil, tribulations, you name it, to let them speak truth to power as oral historians in our community. And again, let some of those book read people deal with some of the academic stuff from different levels. But again, sometimes there's some of us who never had grandparents and never seen our grandparents. And so some of us can't trace that. But yeah, that's a very important issue of the intergenerational thing. We still got some time. I want to switch up again, if I can, Dr. Johnson, ask you to switch up. Many folks do not know the importance of having life insurance with rising costs of burial and cremation. What are your positive and negative experiences in dealing with both the grief and challenge of helping families deal with the passing to the spirit world when you work with clients or customer? And I know you say you do some of that kind of work.
Yes. So again, it's kind of interesting. Some of my friends asking me, "How did you end up getting into life insurance?" One of the things that I see is a lot of, and let me just put a pin in something for a minute. One of the things that I find that you mentioned poverty in education. I work at Title I schools. I've worked at affluent schools, just to run the gamut. And one of the things that is a common denominator that that is a negative to students learning, to families growing, and is poverty. It's not race. It's not, some people might say, oh, these people are not brighter. It's opportunity, access, and poverty. So if you don't have opportunity, if you don't have access, and if there's poverty that's blocking those things, then you are going to have a disenfranchised group of people. And that's one of the things that I find. One of the things that I find as it leads to life insurance, a lot of those same families are struggling when it comes to, dealing with one of the third largest expense, which is life insurance in people's lives. So they end up having to do GoFundMe, or they have to, if they're going to bury their loved one, they're going to have to leave them out of the ground until they raise money. Or so one of the things I get an opportunity to do is I do small life insurance policies. It's called final expenses, if you will. And it gives people an opportunity to do a little financial planning. And the big part of it that I like, it's not that I'm necessarily selling, I'm educating them. Whether or not they get a policy or not at the end of it is up to them, but I get to give them an opportunity to educate them. If you're putting away a little bit of money, you're planning for the future. You actually have an opportunity. You can either borrow from your policy, you leave your policy in place. You can also have money to take care of those final expenses, whether you're being cremated or whether you're going to have a traditional burial, pay for flowers, and just all of the different costs that people don't think about. Now, a lot of people don't like to think about that. Even older people don't like to think about it. This gives me an opportunity to sit with them, talk one-on-one, and just do a little bit of financial planning for that day that we know is going to come for all of them. And so, yeah, final expenses, life insurance. And again, I look at it, I get to educate them whether they get a policy or not. But quite frankly, I am very fortunate. A lot of them do end up getting a policy.
By the way, I have no clue what it costs to bury or cremate somebody in their area, Atlanta, Georgia. I assume it's different price across the country and even internationally. What are we talking ballpark for a basic policy? Because I find it sad when I see people stand on the corner begging for money or asking for money to be donated to go meet fund when some of them have lived large or some of them have spent money on some other things that we may consider frivolous and they don't plan for the future, especially young parents who have kids and so on. So give me a ballpark what a cost would be for not only what you would pay on a policy, a basic policy, and then what does it cost to put somebody in the ground or do cremation?
So cremation, some people kind of default to that for whatever their reasons are. It's all a personal decision. There's nothing wrong or right, whatever people decide. But cremation, sometimes people say, "Oh, well, I'm going to go with cremation. That's only going to cost $2,000." Now you're going to pay at least five thousand
Oh,
dollars.
cremation?
People typically want to cremate, but they still want to have service. They want to,
Oh, okay. All right.
there's
Okay.
a lot of other parts of it as well. But
Oh, okay.
cremation,
Got you. So,
yeah,
okay.
but cremation is going to cost you a little bit more than it used to. But if you're going to do like a traditional burial with the casket and the headstone and the opening and the closing the ground of that, I mean, you are looking at, and the cost is continually rising. You are looking at nationally an average cost of anywhere from 10 to 14,000 and rising, and
Wow.
that's expected to go even more throughout the course of the year. So you can actually get a policy. Certainly, like as we know, the healthier you are, the younger you are, the least expensive it will be. But a lot of times, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they get policies on relatives who might be struggling or having some type of disenfranchise. So I would say, I can't say an average policy. I'll give you a generalized average policy can be anywhere from, let's say, $70. But you can get a lot. You can also get a $50. You can get a 36. You can get a $100. It just depends on the amount of coverage. And again, these are small policies, so you can get anywhere from $5,000 coverage up to $30,000 coverage. And these are whole life policies. So again, you have an opportunity to borrow money from your policy if you need it. That's called like infinite banking. So instead of going to the bank and having to qualify for a loan, after you build cash value in your whole life policies, you can borrow from yourself. So let's say you have a $20,000 policy, you run into a tough spot, you can borrow 5,000 tax free that you can pay back or not pay back, and you still have 15,000, which is currently more than enough to have a beautiful burial.
As you mentioned that, I don't think we do enough community education on planning economic financial literacy and again, life insurance and so on. We have a case on Facebook. We have a school board member who got sick and he's in another town and he needs a certain amount of money to get back. And I'm kind of surprised looking at his connections and who he is that we can't raise. He wants, I think, 15,000 to get back, but it's one of those debilitating diseases. Again, one of the things that I encourage people to do is have some kind of rainy fund and so on. And I know different people in my life and people who have had that where emergency happened, you got to draw down on the family members of the community, but you don't know what's going to happen to us at any given day. And so you need to have some kind of go-to fund or have some decent credit cards that somebody lets you cash out to deal with that. But we really need to do a much better job to help not only adults, but young people talk about financial literacy and things that come up. Just like when you move to a brand new house, some of us don't know you're going to have some extra expenses at that house of maintain it versus just living in an apartment. They think they're going to pay the same amount of rent or whatever. No, oftentimes it's much more, but also you get that tax refund. We're down to about our last minute or so, and I want to give you a chance as an outspoken person move up the economic ladder. What do you attribute your success or accomplishments to? If you had to distill it down to some distinct language or, let's say, epiphany, or we call it a pithy, whatever, what would you say that you can attribute it to being able to get your PhD or your doctorate degree and so on and move along the economic ladder that you've done, coming from humble beginnings?
Yes, so certainly number one, I would say, is my mother and my father's introducing me to Christ and at a very young age, and that has been a very strong part of my life. And then also role modeling. I had an opportunity, and I see it in families and in the children that I serve and the families that I serve now. Role modeling opportunity and access. One of the things that my mother provided for our family was, even though we did not have a lot of money, we thought we were pretty good because we got an opportunity to do summer programs, go out to Offutt Air Force Base. I was at Creighton University at age 13 on campus in this Creighton Upward Bound program. And my tutor was a master's degree student. I was on campus, so all I saw was the college life opportunity. And my mother and my father intentionally put us in those settings where we had access and we had opportunity through various summer programs. Another thing is my oldest brothers and sisters, once my mother got them going on route, those were my role models. So by the time it came along to me and I was like the seventh child, you were under pressure, but it was a good pressure. I had this pressure that people probably didn't know, that not only do I have to graduate, I better graduate in 4 years and not a day longer. Now I know things are different now. The curriculum has changed, but when I got out of high school, I automatically knew ABC, high school, college, because the folks that went before me, they all followed a role model pattern. So that's one of the things we try to do with our kids is we try to provide role models through teachers, through mentors. We try to take them to universities on various field trips and different opportunities so that they can see and they can move out of just their whatever their realm is, whatever their current reality is in their neighborhood. And I think that makes a world of opportunity. Access, opportunity, role modeling, and first and foremost, Jesus Christ.
Okay. Well, we're down to our last point. Any comments before we open it up to the participants? Any last minute comments, Dr. Johnson?
I would just like to mention, in terms of the life insurance thing, I would encourage people not only to look at life insurance for themselves, but one of the things that I did with my family and friends and that we do is if you have a family member or someone and you are one of the matriarchs or the patriarchs in the family that they're going to be coming to you, you have an insurable interest in brother, sister, mom, dad, whatever, you can get a small policy on them so that when that time comes, you're not struggling to pull money from your 401k or passing the hat. So not only can, if people can't afford it, I think people should consider also taking out a policy on a family member to help them out as a family when that time comes.
Okay. We're right up on our halfway mark. And at this point, I'd like to throw it out to the participants. Again, ask Dr. Johnson a question or raise a comment or whatever. So go forward. Raise your hand or you talk directly to her. And this expression, don't everybody speak at one time.
Well, I think part of it is I have been so thorough that maybe there are no questions. If any curiosities, any concerns, I'm very open to feedback because I worked with a really good organization out of Omaha, Nebraska, and I didn't know at the time, but it truly prepared me because one of the things that they taught us was how to accept feedback. And I'm very good at accepting feedback, hard feedback, and I also teach that same skill to my employees, to children, to family, and. So even if you have a concern or something, I'm open to that as well.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. By the way, one of the things we're working on is how to get people to build in advisory groups, evaluation surveys, because again, organizations don't get back to people quick enough. They don't respond to letters. And so the last thing you want to do is have somebody go have a negative experience and not try to help you improve it. So feedback, reaction, so on. Is there anybody in the chat? And look at my stuff here.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
What, Dr. Johnson, what is something that motivated you or drew you to wanting to work with younger people for so long? And what are some challenges that you're seeing, some common challenges that you're seeing amongst Black and brown children coming up in like the different school systems that's not being addressed?
Yes, thank you for that question. Certainly, one of the things that had a very powerful impact on me was my growing up, in a big family and maybe not having access that, as I got older, I realized. But again, we had a lot of access and opportunity through community programs and that. And so the reason why I got in education is because that is what I knew. That's what helped me. And I wanted to provide that for others. In fact, in the school district that I'm currently working in, I had an opportunity to work with Blue Ribbon schools. I mean, just any number of schools. And they literally gave me a choice. And I chose to work at an alternative school where you have a group of folks that are Title I or low socioeconomic status, because I really got an opportunity to impact and to give back. And so that is where I am today. One of the things that I think that is not being addressed is mental health. Mental health challenges. And I think it was even more so highlighted when we were in COVID-19 and coming out of COVID-19. There's still remnants. Some people say we're not completely out of the woods yet, but the mental health is a challenge because you have children that come from households that, as you could imagine, deal with everything that you see. Some of these terrible stories that you see on the news, those are the children that are at my school. Those are the children that are sitting in the classroom next to your child, your granddaughter, and in many cases, and just day to day in the school where I am right now, there are mental health challenges faced by the families, by the students, and in some cases, some of the educators and the adults, we deal with unaddressed mental health challenges. So I think more funding, more programs, more access need to be put into helping students, family, adults, and children with mental health challenges, because a lot of times they end up criminalized in the system, and it's kind of like, why would you penalize somebody for something that they can't help? It's like a manifestation of whatever their mental ailment is. So I would certainly say mental health is something that we need to continue to focus on, to put money and resources in order to help people.
Other questions, other comments? By the way, COVID-19 had a tremendous impact on our society, not only society, but also educational. And I think I saw some recent articles that came from different academic scholars that said the 2 years that we faced that impacted the quality of education for a lot of kids, especially those kids who had a hard time getting access to computers and technology so they could do it from their home. So again, they said there's a COVID covariant that impacted a lot of people throughout the country, and they saw some of the test results versus being in the classroom and so on like that. So that's one of those bumps we got to deal with down the road. If not, we're dealing with it now. Other feedback, other reactions. By the way, one question that hit me, there's an article, Dr. Johnson, that came out that the administrators at UNO are making more money than the faculty members, which brings me to educators. I know you're in the classroom and so on, and then I'm not going to throw any names out here because it might embarrass someone, but I was talking to a professional person who retired from OPS, and I'm just in general, I says, well, what kind of retirement pay you got? And she threw out a number to me, and I'm like, you got to be kidding. That high? It was like 100,000. But she also told me she worked there for over 40 years. And so when she built up her money and so on and whatever, it came up to that. And again, obviously in some institutions, Metro, when I was there, oh no, the city, they matched me like 7%. You don't match a great deal. So if I put in 7%, they put in 7. So when you get finished, you got a certain amount of money laid out in your retirement plus your Social Security. So my question to you is, if you work in the system for a long year, your retirement is much higher if you stay in there longer as an educator, as administrator throughout the country?
That is correct, and it's generally based on your academic achievements. So if you've got a master's degree, you're going to get paid a little bit more. A specialist, a little bit more. A master's, like as I said, a master's, a doctorate, and then it's also based on your longevity. Now, $100,000. I don't want to offend anybody, or I don't want to sound any particular way, but $100,000. Well, I guess I can only give you my perspective. Is not the $100,000 that it used to be. But again, someone who hasn't gotten to that, they might be saying, yeah, that's easy for you to say. So I say this is one of the perspectives, and this is something that I espouse based on what staff, faculty, teachers deal with every day. I believe that teachers' starting baseline salary should be $100,000. They are the
Wow.
teacher, they are the mother, they are the father, they are the mental health professional, they are the nurse. That we ask so much of them. And there's so many things that they have to do that unfortunately you have very little time left for teaching. So I think walking in the door, that should be the baseline for a teacher, literally coming out with their bachelor's degree, and then you build up from there. Now, assistant principals do a lot, a lot. You could say that I'm biased. So I think that, but I'm just saying to you that the teachers are the life's blood. The faculties are the life's blood. And I think that's where the lion's share of the funds can go. And if I can just use my little bully pulpit for a moment, I see someone in the chat who has been a role model for me, Dr. Paula Jones. Hello, Dr. Jones. And if I'm going to say this, there was a question that you asked me when I was at an organization in Omaha, and she didn't know this, but on one of my worst days, because of something that I was dealing with that particular organization, I remember walking into I can't remember what it was called, but it was like the VIP cafeteria where all of the I don't want to say upper echelon. Anyway, the administrators had lunch and I was not really dressed. I think I had on some workout clothes and I was dealing with all kind of stuff. And this was just, and again, this is just relationship building and it's just love and it's just God. I remember she saw me and she said something so gentle and so kind and so welcoming to me, not knowing what I was going through. And it really changed the trajectory of my decision making. And that was one of the things that literally helped me to where I am today. She probably will never know that, but I wanted to share that. So you just never know how you can influence someone with a kind word, with a kind gesture, or by just taking a few minutes to reach out to them. So again, good to see you. Good to see everybody. I'm glad everybody's on the call. And thank you again. I
You know,
stand on your shoulders, my dear.
as you share that, I'm reminded of people who do random acts of kindness, and sometimes it motivates us to do other things. But the question I have raised, and I will raise elsewhere in different circles, is, and I raise it many times: can you name 3 times you've done something to help someone who's oppressed or who's in need? And can you remember that and talk about that within the past year? So, in other words, we need to do that. And I remember a Jewish proverb a guy told me. He said there are only 7 good people on earth who something he made it's kind of a proverb where he says 7 good people on earth who are helping us to stay afloat. And if one of those 7 disappears, we will end as a society. And it was kind of like saying we don't know who those 7 people are, but we want to try to be one of those 7 to be good people, stewards of showing goodness and kindness to people. So I never forgot how you put that, but it was an interesting proverb to hear that. So yeah, other feedback, other questions. By the way, some of the questions, do you have charter schools in your district? And if so, are they performing in Atlanta compared to traditional schools?
Okay, yes, we do have charter schools. And what was the second part of the question?
Do they perform the same as other traditional schools in Atlanta, Georgia?
Well, charter schools have a little more autonomy. And so, they have less of the stringent rules and regulations and how you're going to be spending this money. So they get a little more autonomy to kind of zero in and target and to serve their population in the ways that it specifically needs to be served. So that's one of the advantage of being in a charter school.
Okay. And then the other thing is, when I'm talking about your school district, again, and we had a big fight about desegregation and integration of 2 different concepts, so on. Is Atlanta, Georgia, the city itself predominantly African American? Are the schools predominantly African American? Are they biracial, mixed, whatever? What's the population in that area? Or is it a suburban thing like we do in Omaha, where they're predominantly all white, like Millard or Elkhorn or those kind of schools, Bellevue, which is predominantly white, versus the city of Omaha, where they're predominantly students of color. What is it like there?
Okay, so Atlanta proper is predominantly African American, but then you also have, like, I'm in one of the suburb areas. We are predominantly African American. Then you have other suburbs that are predominantly Caucasian. Then we have another area. We have a very, as we know, a fast growing Hispanic population. So it kind of varies. But what's interesting is, there are pockets where they're segregated. This group is predominantly Hispanic, predominantly Black, predominantly white. Now, you do have some mixture in there, but yeah, Atlanta proper is predominantly African American. And then you
Wow.
have the suburbs that kind of have different predominances.
Wow. 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 By the way, I didn't ask you this question about insurance, but you talked about insurance in Atlanta, Georgia. Do your company, what you do, does it go across other states or city, or you only in that whole state of Georgia for what you do?
No, I am licensed to serve anyone throughout the course of the United States, and you can do that by simply getting a what we call is a non-residence license that's based on each of the individual agents. So I'm licensed in Nebraska. Anybody who's interested, reach out to me right here. But I'm licensed in Nebraska, Florida.
Shameless plug. Okay, I got
Yeah,
that.
a little, right, right.
A little shameless plug.
Alabama.
I wasn't expecting that, y'all. Okay.
Sorry about that if I broke a rule. But in either case, so I'm licensed in several states here in the South, but also Nebraska, Indiana, and throughout. And really, I can do life insurance anywhere because I can do a non-residence license within a 24-hour period.
Now, if I remember from either some training or you or someone, that they actually have some kind of insurance that if somebody dies overseas, they could have them cremated and bring their ashes back to the United States. They fly over and bring it back. Do you guys do anything like that?
We do. Well, and actually, basically, some of the life insurances are literally like cash policy. So when something happens, particularly like with ours, what is really good about it is they will put the cash in the beneficiary's account within 1 to 3 days.
Oh, you
No,
serious?
absolutely. No death certificate required, because if you think about it, coming out of COVID-19, insurance companies can verify death a whole bunch of other ways within a 24-hour period. So that's one of the positive things. Now you don't have to hold the body out of the ground while you wait for the money. You don't have to cash out your 401k and wait for the death certificate, which typically takes a month to 2 months to
Right.
get. So what happens is with these policies and other companies as well, the money can literally be dropped in your account in 1 to 3 days. And so now you have cash if you need to fly a body back that is going to cost $10,000 if you're bringing the body, or a little bit less if you're bringing the cremains, which is the cremated remains. They call them the cremains. Then you have the cash to spend however you would like to spend the cash. So yes, we do
You
have those
know,
policies.
let me see. If somebody else has a comment, feedback. Let's see if there's any in the chat. By the way, what's your game plan as you retire? I know you say you within a year or two you're thinking about it. Again, sometimes people say it and they still stay on. I was talking to somebody at a local nonprofit, and the person told me they're going to retire within a year. When I asked them, they looked at me sideways like I wasn't supposed to say nothing. But I guess they got so good or easy for them they didn't want to retire. So, what's your game plan?
Well, like I said, currently I'm working on a national youth advocacy board membership, and I'm so excited about it because we're doing so many great things for children all across the United States. And I get to work with a lot of brilliant minds, and we all have a very like-minded spirit in that whatever we have, whatever we are, whatever our resources are, all we want to do is humbly serve families and communities that don't have their own voice, that are disenfranchised, to try to help to make it a better world, because the platform and the main thing is we are all part of the human race. So I'm very excited about the work that I'm going to continue to do with that company. Of course, I'll continue with my life insurance. And, I'm sure that I'll be working in some aspect, either with my school district or other school districts throughout the country. I'm wide open. So if there's someone out there that has something available to me, I'm also wide open. Another shameless plug. But as long as I'm helping children, as long as I'm serving families, it'll be something in that line of work from now until the day I get to heaven.
Well, as you mentioned that, I remember Senator Chambers said years ago, he says, when Father Time catches me, I want to be in motion, meaning even if I'm retired or whatever, I'll always be doing something to help people in the struggle. But one of the challenges I find with some people who retire, and I learned this when I studied gerontology and got my certificate, that sometimes people die prematurely because they become bored or they become inactive and they don't do anything. So it's very important to stay active even after you retire. And I would love to see more people who are retired and don't have someone looking over their shoulders do more social justice work. Because when I go to certain meetings, there are certain people who are lone timers. I've seen them. And again, when you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder, you get to challenge systems, say things unfiltered. Hopefully, the filter is appropriate that you can make changes. But I understand what you're saying. I just would like to see more people throwing down some heavy light, looking at some of the craziness that's going on in our society. Because we shouldn't be locking up children and women in, as they call the camp in McCook, clink clank camp in McCook, are doing the kind of things that we're treating families like they're criminals, when again there are other factors that impact their lives is because they come from a different place. And so I just love to see more engagement. We got about 10 minutes left, and I want to 12 minutes. I want to give other people a chance to raise questions or comments. I'm forever
I have
holding
a
your peace.
question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought I put in the chat. I don't know what happened to it. But so coming from Nebraska, moving to Georgia, can you talk about like the impact that had being in somewhere that's surrounded by so many successful people that look like you, and how that affected the way that you moved afterwards?
Yes, and thank you for that question. One of the things that I found when I first came to Georgia, and again, this is kind of something that we talked about a little bit earlier. I was working with a child care organization, and I would take my children to therapy appointments, so they would go to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And what I found, and at the time I think I was 32 years old at the time, but I would find that there would be 25 years old, and they would either be working on their doctorate or they were already a doctorate. I mean, just young, successful people. And then their mentor would be there as the main. And I just thought it was like, it was mind blowing for me, but it also served as a role model for me. And I decided that is what I want to do. I want to go to the next level, but not just me go to the next level. I want to bring people along with me. So that was one of the real positive impact, because there are so many successful brown and black people that look like me, and there are so many opportunities. Now, of course, there are some slippery slopes, and you're going to deal with nepotism. It's not a perfect world, and you got some corrupt. You got that wherever you go. I find that in any organization, but you see yourself, you see the opportunity, and kind of one of the things that you said there, Jamal, as you get older, hopefully, I think this young generation already has it figured out. You should be able to sit in any meeting and speak your mind as long as you're professional, diplomatic. It's okay to say the emperor has no clothes, or it's okay to say, hey, that was a great way we did things before with children. Maybe we should consider this, and we don't just have to follow suit of what's been done and again and again. It's okay to buck the system in an appropriate way, because if you don't, we continue to do the same thing that may or may not work, even when the data tells us that it does not work. So, again, for me, it served as a catalyst. It just kind of kept propelling me where my mom and dad and my family had already started. And it just made it more boom right then and there, because people were just naturally moving up the ladder because that was naturally what they should do. And they looked like me. This is what you should do. This is what is expected. And I even had role models in my school and in some of my various jobs who kind of pulled me along. They said, hey, get in this program, do this, let me help you. Here's how you do it. So that was one of the things that was very positive for me when I got here.
As you mentioned that, I tell people that started growing up in Omaha, Nebraska. I don't remember, but maybe one or two doctors who were African Americans as a kid. And it was when I went to Africa, I saw black people in all kinds of positions, airplane pilots, you name it. And it kind of blew my mind to see folks do that when I grew up in a segregated apartheid city, that you didn't have that many role models who were in certain professions. I never met an engineer who was African American until after I graduated from college. And so my point, or architect for that matter, even though I had classmates who went into that as a major. But my point is, it's very important to see those certain role models. And I'm not saying just people who are professional, but even people who were bricklayers or did certain kind of jobs. And so it's very important for our city to have a smorgasbord of people. I do know the labor unions were very racist in our country and in the city for many years, and you had to go through hell to get into certain positions. And even today, it's difficult. But it's very important that young kids see people they want to inspire, because the only thing we knew a lot was preachers and teachers. And again, the world has opened up a lot more. But I do think it's very important to have opportunities where they can meet people in those various professions, and particularly see women in professions that have predominantly been men, or vice versa, And so we got to talk about gender issues as well as we deal with other occupations. We got a number more minutes left. Other feedback, other comments.
And if I can just kind of share based on what you said, Jamal, even with our children, like even when I get an opportunity to talk to children, they can sit in front of you and they're in trouble for something silly that they did. They stole something, they touched some, whatever the case may be. You always want to, I learned this, you instill hope. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This happened. And the thing that I require you to do is I require you to be honest. I require you to be accountable, and I require you to learn from it, and let's move on. And you have to sit before them and let them know, hey, not too long ago, this happened to me. I use some experience. And then when you can relate to them, now they have more of they are more inclined to want to follow your lead, to bond with you, and you can influence them in a positive way, as opposed to, if you don't do this, I'm going to get you with the stick. I certainly believe in managing, in role modeling, in coaching, in all that you do with positive influence and with the care, as opposed to punishment, and as opposed to, hitting them over the head with the stick, if you will.
As you said that, I want to tell a story that related to me. When I was a kid, I did a little shoplifting at Trago's, which was over by 20th and I want to say Clark Street. And the way I got away with it is I would take it and stick it under my hat. And apparently, unbeknownst to me, I must have had this hood on that didn't go all the way down. So I'm walking out with some potato chips under my hood. And the owner of the store, Trago, said, "Hey, what you doing taking that?" I said, "Oh, that person back there gave it to me." And I put I took the potato chips out of whatever and put it back. Man, I was so embarrassed. I haven't stole since then. But my point was, he basically didn't call the police on me. He just knew who I was, and I'm not sure if had an account with the store number. We was known for going to that store because one of the very few neighborhood stores growing up as a little kid. But I do remember stealing that, and then from that point on, no more potato chips under my hood. Again, and especially after I got caught. But I like telling students that was my turnaround. I had an epiphany that, I better stop doing that because I didn't want to go to jail or prison over some potato chips as a young kid. But it had a profound impact on me because I ain't gonna lie, there were some times I did get a few kibbles and bits in the store, and I shouldn't have done that. But I got caught maybe after the second or third time, and that was it. And I haven't looked back since.
Well, and then, certainly, as an educator, as a teacher, in all that I do, I simply say, there go I, but the grace of God. So, we had a situation, I can look at a homeless person, someone who's dealing with HIV, someone who's locked up, whatever. That could very well be me had I not had someone to stand on their shoulders, had I had not someone to give me access, opportunity, to give me grace, because I've got some situations that certainly could have derailed me in my life, but for someone who gave me grace and mercy. So I think if you look at it like that, nobody's perfect. We are all here to help lift our brothers and our sisters. And, just when you think you're high and mighty, you can fall from grace. There go I, but the grace of God. That person that's homeless, that's me. That person that's locked up, that's me. Whatever the situations, what can I do to help to mitigate that situation? Because there go I, except want someone who stood in the path to help me to go a different way and to get the opportunities and the positive outcomes that I've been able to get.
One thing before we get ready to close down, and this will give you a chance to closing comments. I remember at St. Martin's in my 25 years of working with low-income women and families and so on. I met a lot of diamonds in the rough, and some had actually gone on to better lifestyles because they were able to move up the echelon in spite of the cliff effect. And I do remember about two or three women who made speeches or comments in the meeting that would be like brilliant. Photographic memories, you name it. And I remember when they talked to some of the people, Department of Social Service. I think we're the only time that the Commission of Education, the Commissioner of State Education in Nebraska came to North Omaha was on my watch at St. Martin's. But I remember one of the young women talked about her kid in the school system, and she went like a perfect speech all through her head, and it was like she had written it down. It was that perfect? And I says, man, if this woman had opportunities, man, she'd be like a college professor. And I've met people who have photographic memories in the community that, again, they can remember stuff just like you said one time, complex things. They can play it back to you just like that. And so oftentimes we don't harness those kind of people in our community. And I think we got to do a better job of bringing the least among us to the front and get all the ones who are out front fat mouthing and doing nothing sometime and let them stay in the middle or go back to the end of the bus, as we would say, because they're not throwing out the heavy light. Dr. Johnson, we're down to the last minute or so, and I want to give you a chance to any closing comments you want to say to our listening audience, and also if somebody want to catch up with you, how would they do that in terms of the product that you're selling or promoting with that?
Well, I don't mind. I don't know if I'm supposed to give up my number on this, but if you could, I don't know if I think you said it's going to be.
It's going to be on the website.
Okay, so they can reach out to me. I have
Email address or phone number. How you do
email
on the web?
address. My email address is my first name, which is Lerlean, Lerlean at gmail.com. Real simple.
Okay, that's probably the best way.
I got to lock that in. Closing comments, I would just simply say, continue to reach out to other people. Empathy, that's everything. There go I, but the grace of God. Put yourself in the shoes of the person. And one of the things that I tell my young people, whatever the issue is in the world that is not solved, and they sit before you, the person who has the most issues, it may not be resolved, whether it's cancer, global warming, whatever you believe, poverty, whatever the issue is, because the answer might be in that very person that you're locking up, or that very child that's sitting in front of you at the alternative school, or that very home. So the way that you get the best out of is you have to be inclusive, because the answer may not lie in me. I would like to think I have all the answers, but I'm nowhere near that. I have to have a diverse group of people, and is not the main thing that we resolve the issue. It doesn't have to come from me, it doesn't have to come from somebody who looks like me. It just has to be the answer to help us to resolve or move closer to a positive outcome for the entire human race.
And as you close on that note, I thank you very much, Dr. Lerlean Johnson, for sharing your experience, your travels, and especially more than anything, your words of inspiration to our community, because oftentimes in this day and time, we're not a lot of people like that. One of the things that bothered me today is the number of directors and people who will get on Facebook and won't do anything in terms of their own institutions. I talked to one person, I'm going to throw his name out, told me he served on 7 boards of directors. If you sell on 7 boards of directors, how are you running your shop? And then secondly, I saw an article today on one of the comments, and somebody said, we no longer have 600 nonprofits in North Omaha, we have 1,000. And if you look at our condition in the community, sometimes it's gotten worse because, again, I just saw they had a study of $500,000 to study trauma. Well, who got the kickback? Why do you need $500,000? The city just got through doing a study on poverty, and they spent about $5,000 for the Justice Institution. And I talked to one of the WhatsAppers on question is, what's next? And again, I don't know that the people in charge of that have any clue what they're going to do. I think they may have an advisory committee, but if you don't have poor people or people who've come through the ranks to help you with that, it's not going to move any far. And so, as many of us know, we've been outstudied to death. It sits on the shelves, it acquired dust. But again, at the end of the day, looking at the composite of our numbers, whether it be low-income people, the gaps, African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, some of our numbers have declined instead of going up to be better. So on that note, I would like to leave you to say that we have to make a difference to make this society better. As we always close out and throwing out some heavy light, may the force be with you. Barocco.